the digestive tract of the tadpole is essentially a straight tube. There's no holding tank. So the material comes in and it passes through that tube. It's all very, very small pieces. And so they're going to be digested as they pass through that tube. But now you're going to be feeding on bugs and worms. And you can't just pass that through your system. You need a holding tank because it's going to take a little bit longer to dismantle an entire earthworm than it is a tiny piece of plant food that is maybe the size of a pinhead. So we develop a holding tank. We develop a stomach. In addition, believe it or not, the total length of the digestive tract will shorten. And that's because once you get that animal dismantled, it's easier to absorb the animal material than it is plant material. Plant material has cellulose and lignins and stuff like that. So we get a tongue forming, we get a stomach as a transformation because it was a straight tube and all we do is expand a portion of that straight tube to give us a stomach. And then the gut shortens. That would be what would we call that? I'd call that not a development, a transformation. Okay. Respiration. Anurans will develop 2 pairs of functional gills near the time of hatching from the egg. Okay, 2 pairs of functional gills. There may be a 3rd pair, but it's usually rudimentary and not very functional. So in general, 2 functional pairs of gills appearing at about the time of hatching, which makes sense because they need that oxygen as soon as they come out of the egg. When they first come out of the egg, those gills, external gills, are visible. But they soon get covered over by the operculum. Right? So that's why we're calling it a gill chamber, because inside is where you find the gills, as well as the developing forelegs of that tadpole. Okay. Water is going to be brought in and pass over those, and then it is going to exit through a structure called a spiracle, which again is not homologous to spiracles in fishes, but they use that word. Yes. So if you look at this diagram, the nice thing about it is it's showing you the different location of various, the spiracle in various kinds of fish. So yes, the water would come in through the mouth, and it's going to pass out through a gill slit and over the gills, and then out to the external world. Here's the spiracle on this particular tadpole. In this tadpole, there's only one spiracle, and it's located just anterior to the tail. Here, there's only one, and it's anterior, about mid-body. Here, it's got a little tube on the end, and it's on the side of the body. And here's another example where it's just an elongate tube. But the principle's the same in all of them. The water comes in through the mouth, passes through an external gill slit, over the external gills, and then out through that spiracle. So these are anuran tadpoles, and you do not see any gills on their sides. That's because the gills are inside that gill chamber, covered over by the operculum on the side. Okay. All right. Lungs will become functional late in the larval stage, and they may even go up and gulp air. Right? When might they gulp air? When might that be more likely? Why? Yeah, so it's more warm water. Just depends on if it's a very warm time of the year, less oxygen in the water, they're more likely to go up and gulp. So they can supplement their external gills with oxygen obtained in the lungs later in metamorphosis, but not early on because the lungs don't start appearing until late. Okay, urogenital system. There's changes in structure, but there's also changes in how they're functioning. And I want to just look at that right away. If you're a larvae, you produce a large amount of dilute urine. Water is just everywhere. You're surrounded by water. It's it's nothing. It's cheap. And so you can afford to have a lot of urine coming out of your body. You just replace that water immediately because you're surrounded by water. Adults, though, are surrounded by air. You have this problem of drying out. And so the adults are going to secrete or excrete a much more concentrated urine. Right? So less water in their urine than the larval form. Right? So that's an adaptation to living on the land. So in general that occurs, but you also get a difference in what molecule is used for your nitrogenous waste. So you're breaking down proteins, excess nitrogen is generated doing that. You have to get rid of that excess nitrogen. Well, the tadpoles are going to use ammonia. And that's good. I mean, there's very few bonds left. Most of the energy's been extracted, so you're not losing a lot of energy. But the problem with ammonia is that it's toxic in very small amounts. But if you're a larvae, well, it's easy to have that diffuse across your body surface. You have a large amount of dilute urine, constantly removing this material from your system. So you don't have to worry about it building up in your system. You're surrounded by water. You can flush your system constantly with water, as well as have it diffuse right into the water around your body. When you're an adult, you don't have that option. You're trying to keep moisture inside your body. You're getting barriers to the movement of water flowing out of your body or gas flowing out of your body. Right? You don't want a dilute urine, you want a concentrated urine, but you can't concentrate the ammonia because if you do, it'll kill you. So the solution is that we develop a different molecule for our nitrogenous waste. And that is going to be urea. Urea contains more energy. There's more bonds in it, so there's more energy. So it's a little wasteful in that sense. But the value in using urea is that you can concentrate it more in your system without it being toxic. That means that you need less water in order to flush it from your system. You can produce a concentrated urine and not lose as much water. So what do you think? If you were a totally aquatic frog, which one might you rely on?
Ammonia.
Yeah, actually, there are, like the Pipidae, for example, which is a totally aquatic frog. It doesn't come out of the water. They excrete a lot of theirs in the form of ammonia. They can afford to do that. But the animals that actually come out onto land, we have to have a transformation of the kidney. So there's a difference in the biochemical processes that are going on so that the end result is primarily urea for the terrestrial dwelling ones. Okay, whereas the larvae are using that ammonia. Oh, I don't know. Is there anything else? Tadpole larvae have a lateral line. We did not go over the structure and functioning of the lateral line in fish. It's something I dropped because of the snow. But this is a sensory organ in the animal that detects changes in pressure in the water. And these differences in pressure could be due to depth, but they can also be due to animals moving nearby or water waves getting reflected off things in the environment. It's a very useful, functional thing if you're living in water. When you come out onto land, it's useless because the movements of the air currents are simply not great enough. to cause those sensory cells to fire. So, tadpoles have a lateral line organ. Most adults do not. Right? We did see lateral lines in things like the Amphiuma, and we saw lateral lines, those stitches in the Pipidae. Okay? That's because they're totally aquatic, so they maintain that characteristic. But if you're coming out onto land, it's not a very good feature to have. And then lastly, there are some changes in the circulatory system. Larvae has a simple one ventricle and one atrium. And the adults are going to have two atria and one ventricle. There's functional reasons for that. We won't go into it today. Now, the last thing, we'll quit for today, and then I'm going to come back and talk about hormonal control of metamorphosis after the break. All of this that we've been talking about has been geared towards the anurans. And there are some differences between salamander larvae and urine larvae. First off, so in salamanders, we have three pairs of functional gills, right? Whereas mostly in the anurans, it's two functional pair and maybe a rudimentary third pair. There's a wide mouth in salamander larvae, salamander tadpoles, but it's usually narrow and circular in frogs and toads. And that correlates with some differences between what those tadpoles are eating. So by and large, the tadpoles of frogs and toads are herbivorous. They're scraping little bits of plant material, algae, off rocks and sticks or eating bottom mud. The larvae of salamanders, their tadpoles, are carnivorous. They'll be eating little bugs in the water. So if you look at these diagrams again, up here and look at the mouth openings of these anuran tadpoles, by and large, you can see that they're oval to circular in outline. Right? So they're just going up and going like that. But down here, these are obvious salamander larvae, so that you have a very broad head and a very broad mouth, very similar to what would be present in the adult. You can also see 1, 2, 3 functional gills on the outside of the animal. And all of these big dots, those are all lateral line organs on that larva. And then the other thing is forelegs are always visible. And 5. They're always elongate. So to a large degree, they do look like miniature salamanders. Whereas the frog and toad larvae are more compact. So you do have some fundamental differences. I don't really have some good salamander larvae, but I do have nice bullfrog tadpoles. You can see the caudal fin on them. You can probably not see any forelimbs on them. I'm not sure if there's any hind limbs visible even. What else can you see on there? The very round circular mouth.
Is there an adaptation to not having forelimbs visible or well, outside of the body?
I've never heard a functional explanation, a selective explanation. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Hydrodynamic? It could be. Makes it easier to swim, you're more streamlined. That's a possibility. Then how do salamanders get by with that? You're right. Okay. So in lab, what we're going to do, if you want to stick around, is start on the reptiles. So we're going to do the same thing we did last time, and that is